Hello, friends. Today we will tell you about an event that has already entered the recent history of the conflict. A medium reconnaissance ship of the Ukrainian Navy called Serropol ceased to exist as a combat unit after a precision strike carried out at the mouth of the Danube. The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed the result, while the Ukrainian side reported losses and the rescue of most of the crew. This has been one of the most notable episodes in recent weeks. To stay up to date with the most important events, subscribe to our channel and stay with us. The history of this ship began several years ago. After the events of the so-called Euromaidan in Kiev, the idea arose to urgently create new military vessels. There were no funds or time to build a full-fledged ship. Therefore, it was decided to convert a regular fishing trawler of Project 502 EM into a reconnaissance ship. The work was entrusted to a company in Kiev, which was first called Lenin's Forge, and later became known as the Forge on Rybalski. Over the course of 3 years, the hull of the former trawler was equipped with the Melchior radio reconnaissance system, a 30mm artillery mount, and Western-made antennas. After the modernization was completed, the ship was renamed Serropol. It passed sea trials and was incorporated into the Ukrainian Navy between 2010 and 2019. However, during the start of the special military operation, the Ukrainian fleet suffered serious losses. Many large ships were put out of action, and some vessels were sunk by Ukrainian sailors themselves. Serropol remained among the survivors, although it did not appear in the media for a long time. Nevertheless, the tasks assigned to it remained important. Reconnaissance ships are designed to collect data, observe, and ensure coordination. Such ships rarely engage in direct combat, but many command decisions depend on them. That is why the destruction of the Serropol became a serious goal for the Russian forces. Preparations for the operation were made in advance. The difficulty lay in the fact that the ship was located at the mouth of the Danube, where the interests of different countries intersect, and the water area is saturated with civilian vessels. In order to disable the ship while minimizing the risks to civilian objects, it was necessary to carefully plan the actions. Several units were involved in the preparations. Intelligence networks provided information on routes and schedules. Technical reconnaissance equipment tracked signals and analyzed radar activity. Gradually, a complete picture emerged at headquarters. The Serropol patrolled, collected data on the movements of Russian forces, and monitored the Black Sea. It was decided to use unmanned boats for the strike. These new tools have become one of the key instruments of modern maritime confrontation. Russian forces had already practiced using such systems during exercises in the Baltic Sea. Now the moment of truth had arrived. It is Saturday night. Silence reigns over the river. Unmanned boats glide through the darkness, guided by operators from a distance. Their target has been determined in advance. At this moment, a network of observers is working behind the water's edge. They confirm that the Serropol is anchored at its lights are dimmed, the crew is resting, but the watch is on duty. No one suspects that in a few minutes the situation will change. Thus begins the story of one of the most daring attacks in recent times. Preparations for the operation against the Serropol began long before that night. The planning was carried out in several stages. First, it was necessary to understand where exactly the ship would be located and what tasks it was performing. According to intelligence reports, the Serropol was monitoring the water area, recording the movements of Russian ships, and collecting radio technical information. Its presence at the mouth of the Danube was explained by the fact that it was a convenient location for controlling part of the Black Sea and monitoring transport corridors. Agent networks provided initial information that the ship would remain at this point in the coming days. Then electronic surveillance was brought in. Radio interception and signal analysis confirmed the presence of the Ukrainian vessel. Each new piece of information fit into the overall picture. The plan for the operation took shape. At one of the meetings, the final decision was made to use unmanned boats. These devices were compact and fast platforms, equipped with explosive charges and remote control systems. They could move unnoticed, blend in with the waves, and approach the target at the most vulnerable moment. There was already experience in using them, but the first truly significant test in a combat situation was yet to come. The operators underwent training in advance. A simulation of the water area with moving models was created for them to practice their actions in conditions as close to reality as possible. The training lasted for weeks. Each operator had to master the skills to the point of automatism. A mistake in such an operation would mean the loss of valuable equipment and the failure of the mission. The moment came when the training was complete. Headquarters approved the route for the unmanned boats. It was designed to minimize the likelihood of detection. To this end, areas with natural cover and sectors where the intensity of civilian shipping reduced the risk of being spotted were used. Before departure, the operators were briefed once again. They were to move in complete radio silence until the moment of guidance. The boats were controlled via closed communication channels, encrypted and protected from interception. The night was not chosen by chance. In darkness and limited visibility, the chances of detecting the boats are reduced. The river current helped to conceal the noise of the engines. Slowly and steadily, the unmanned boats approached their destination. On the Serropol, the observers on duty continued their routine service. Radar signals scanned the area, but small targets against the background of the waves could go unnoticed. The situation appeared calm. The crew, tired after a long shift, was in their cabins. Meanwhile, the operators monitored every movement. Data confirming the correctness of the course flashed on the monitors. At one point, it was necessary to correct the trajectory to bypass a civilian vessel that had unexpectedly appeared nearby. The maneuver was performed without compromising secrecy. When less than a kilometer remained to the target, the operators switched to precision guidance mode. At that moment, the tension reached its peak. Every movement of the cursor on the screen, every feedback signal determined the outcome of the entire operation. The boats continued to close in. Reports were coming into headquarters in real time. Everyone understood that in a few more minutes, the outcome would be decided. In the distance, the silhouette of a ship appeared. It stood motionless, dimly lit by navigation lights. For the operators, this was the decisive moment. Their preparation, training, and weeks of work by the intelligence network were coming to fruition. The boats headed straight for their target. The water hid their outlines. The crew of the Serropol still suspected nothing. Thus began the final act of an operation that was to demonstrate the capabilities of new tactics and show determination. It was almost midnight. The mouth of the Danube was plunged into silence. Only the occasional flashes of light on the shore reminded us that life was still going on nearby. There was no movement or noise on the water. But at that very moment, small unmanned boats guided by operators were moving towards their target. The silhouette of the Serropol became clearer and clearer. Now its outline filled the entire screen of the control station. The metal hull, masts, antennas, everything looked calm as if on a normal duty, but the calm was deceptive. When the boats approached within striking distance, the operators simultaneously switched the systems to attack mode. Each of their movements was accompanied by brief reports to headquarters. At that moment, everyone was extremely focused. There was no room for error. No one on the ship noticed the approaching threat. The radars continued to operate, but the small targets against the background of ripples and currents were not perceived as a danger. For the officer on watch, it was a routine duty post, another night without incident. The seconds dragged on endlessly. The first boat set course and headed straight for the ship's side. The second was slightly to the side, ready to complete the task if necessary. In an instant, the water burst into flames. A dull thud sounded in the darkness. The metal hull of the ship shook. A shock wave rolled across the decks. An alarm immediately sounded on the Serropol. Signals, commands running across the deck. The crew, caught off guard, tried to understand what had happened. But the second boat was already approaching its target. Its trajectory was perfectly calculated. The new blow hit the middle of the hull. The ship shook again. The water around it foamed, and spray and debris rose. Screams and the sound of alarms could be heard from inside. The ship had been breached. It began to list rapidly to one side. The operators watched what was happening through the cameras until the very end. When the systems recorded the navigation lights going out and a sharp drop in energy, it became clear that the task had been accomplished. From that moment on, the Serropol ceased to be a combat-ready unit. On board, the crew fought for survival. Firefighters rushed to the site of the damage. Water poured in through the hole. The pumps were working at full capacity. The commander gave orders to rescue people. Distress signals were sent out. Part of the crew was quickly evacuated in lifeboats. According to official statements from the Ukrainian side, most of the sailors were rescued. However, there were still casualties. One serviceman was killed, several were injured, and several were reported missing. Fires and splashes were already visible from the shore. The information spread instantly. The first reports appeared in Ukrainian sources, then were confirmed by the Russian Ministry of Defense. It is symbolic that this ship was once a fishing vessel converted into a reconnaissance ship. Its fate ended at the mouth of the river, where it was attempting to observe and record movements. The strike on the Serropol showed that unmanned maritime systems have become a full-fledged weapon capable of solving strategic-level tasks. Whereas such devices were previously considered auxiliary, they have now become a key element. That night showed that even protected ships can be vulnerable to new tactics. For the Ukrainian fleet, this event was not only a physical blow, but also a moral one. One of the last large ships lost its combat capability. The headquarters summed up the results. The operation was deemed a success. The systems worked exactly as intended. The new technology proved its effectiveness in real combat. The next morning, footage from the scene was broadcast around the world. Some spoke of the loss of yet another ship. Others emphasized that a new type of weapon had been used. For everyone, it was a signal that the naval confrontation had reached a new level. Thus ended a night that will go down in history. The ship, which until recently was considered a symbol of the revival of the Ukrainian fleet, now remained only in news reports. The operation against the Serropol instantly became a topic of discussion, not only in Russia and Ukraine, but also in many countries around the world. For the international community, it was a signal that the line of confrontation had shifted to a new plane. Now it is not just about aerial drones or artillery. Unmanned boats capable of changing the balance of power at sea have entered the arena. Experts noted several key points. First, the Ukrainian fleet suffered serious damage at the beginning of the special military operation. Most of the large ships were put out of action. The flagship Hetman Sagadatny was sunk in Nikolaev. The medium landing ship Yuri Olifarenko was destroyed in the Odessa area. Only small boats, assault boats, and several minesweepers remained in service, transferred from Western countries. The loss of the Serropol meant the virtual disappearance of the last remnants of a full-fledged fleet. Secondly, the use of unmanned boats provided practical confirmation that the new tactics were working. Whereas such systems had previously been considered experimental, they had now proven their effectiveness in a real combat situation. The success of the attack showed that even a medium-sized reconnaissance ship was not immune to a covert attack from the water. For Ukraine, this loss was painful not only militarily but also politically. Ukrainian Navy spokesman Dmitry Pletenchuk acknowledged the attack, reported casualties, and emphasized that part of the crew had been rescued. His words reflected an acknowledgement of the seriousness of the situation. When a representative publicly confirms an event, it means that it is no longer possible to hide it. For Russia, the destruction of the Serropol was a demonstration of the capabilities of new technologies and precise planning. The Ministry of Defense emphasized that the operation was carried out without risk to civilian ships and facilities, and that the result was achieved in full. The international reaction was mixed. Western media outlets reported that the Ukrainian fleet had suffered a new loss. Some publications wrote about the first use of Russian unmanned boats in real combat. Others expressed concern that such technologies could change the nature of warfare at sea. Analysts note that the significance of this operation goes far beyond a single episode. It shows that the development of unmanned systems is becoming a major trend in modern armed conflict. Whereas large ships or aircraft carriers used to be the main symbols of power, small and inconspicuous devices are now increasingly playing a decisive role. What will happen next? There are several possible scenarios. The first is that Russia will continue to develop and use unmanned boats, increasing their range, speed, and power. In that case, strikes on Ukrainian targets at sea could become systematic. The second is that Ukraine will try to develop countermeasures. These could include strengthening coastal defenses, installing net barriers, and using aircraft for patrols. but the effectiveness of such measures remains questionable. The third scenario concerns the international response. The success of the operation could prompt other countries to accelerate the development of their own unmanned maritime systems. Such developments are already underway in the US, UK, China, and Turkey. Now they will receive an additional incentive. Perhaps we are on the threshold of a new era when classic naval forces will give way to fleets of drones. For Ukraine, the loss of the Serropol also has symbolic significance. This ship was built in the period after Euromaidan as a symbol of the revival of the fleet. Now it has become a reminder of how vulnerable such projects are in the context of modern conflict. On a political level, Russia has gained an additional argument. Within the country, the event is presented as proof of the effectiveness of new technologies and the professionalism of the military. For allies, it is a signal that the Russian army is implementing the latest technology and is capable of solving tasks of any complexity. For opponents, it is a worrying sign. They understand that if unmanned boats can be successfully used against a medium-sized reconnaissance ship, then similar actions are possible against other targets. This means that their own fleets must prepare for new challenges. The operation against the Serropol changed not only the balance of power in the Black Sea, but also perceptions of the military future. Now each side will be forced to take unmanned systems into account in their strategic planning. The story of the Serropol showed that in modern conflict, it is not only the number of vehicles or the tonnage of the fleet that matters. What matters is precise planning, new technologies, and the ability to use them at the right moment. This operation was a kind of test of capabilities, and the result was unequivocal. Unmanned naval boats, which until recently were perceived as an auxiliary means, prove that they are capable of solving strategic-level tasks. Their stealth, maneuverability, and effectiveness make them a game-changing tool. For Ukraine, the loss of the Serropol was a serious blow. This ship was built as a symbol of the renewal of the naval forces. Hopes were pinned on it, and it was presented as an example of how, even in difficult conditions, it is possible to create new units for the fleet. Now, only history remains of these hopes. For Russia, this event confirmed that the development of unmanned technology is moving in the right direction. The Army demonstrated its ability to conduct operations that combine reconnaissance, agent networks, electronic surveillance, planning, and the precise use of new weapons. All this demonstrates a high level of coordination and professionalism. For the international community, the operation was an alarming signal. Western news outlets ran headlines about the first successful use of Russian unmanned boats. Analysts wrote that this could change approaches to naval warfare. Some experts noted that large ships, which take decades to build and cost billions, are becoming vulnerable to small and relatively inexpensive weapons. This comparison sounds like a new metaphor for military reality: old giants versus new shadow hunters. What next? We are likely to see even faster technological development. Russia will continue to improve its unmanned boats. Ukraine will look for ways to defend itself. Other states will step up their own programs, and each new operation will only reinforce this process. The event at the mouth of the Danube will go down in history as one of the key moments. It changed not only the balance of power in the Black Sea, but also the general perception of the war of the future. It is now clear that the future belongs to those who know how to combine technology and strategy. It is important for viewers to understand that such episodes are not just dry reports. Behind them is the work of hundreds of people, the tension of commanders and operators, the labor of scouts and engineers. All this comes together in a single line, which at a certain moment leads to a decisive result. Today, we witnessed how one ship ceased to exist as a military unit. Tomorrow, history may repeat itself in another place, with other objects and other consequences, but the essence remains the same. Those who possess technology and know how to apply it gain an advantage. So, let's sum up. The operation against the Serropol marked a new level of naval confrontation. It confirmed the effectiveness of unmanned boats. It showed the vulnerability of large ships. It changed the political and military landscape. The future will depend on how each side draws conclusions. For Russia, this is a chance to consolidate its technological superiority. For Ukraine, it is a reason to look for new solutions. For the world, it is a reminder that wars are changing, and changing very quickly. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new content, and stay up to date with the latest developments. Your interest and attention help us continue our work and tell the truth about what is happening.